Welcome to this episode of The Martial Truth. History, specifically Karate and Kobudo history. So before we get started with that, a couple of housekeeping things. I'm closing in on 14,000 subscribers. I really appreciate everybody that subscribes to the channel. If you haven't, please subscribe. And if you like the video, please click that like and share. Very important. Helps us with the way YouTube does things. We have some other things coming up. We have some very interesting interviews coming up. So hopefully I'll be able to post one of those next week. So it'll be good. We're going to be having more and more interviews as we go along with, other videos that we'll do in terms of the martial truth. Okay. Again, you want to purchase merchandise, you can click on the links below the video. You'll see all the different shirts and different things that are available. Feel free. And if you want to consider becoming a monthly member for $2.99, help support the channel, allows me to do things that I can help to do other things to hopefully make the channel better. All right. And as always, if you have any suggestions of videos you'd like to see, people you'd like to see me interview, please drop me a line and let me know what you think. All right. So let's get on to Karate and Kobudo history. So recently I posted a video of the founder of Isshinryu, Tatsuo Shimabuku, doing Seiyuchin Kata back in the mid to late 1950s. Okay. And I had shared an article recently, a translation of a section of a book, the Okinawan Karate and Kobudo Encyclopedia, which was published in 2008 in Okinawa. It's only available in Japanese. So most Americans haven't seen it, probably not even aware of it, have never read it unless they read Japanese. Okay. And it's edited by Shigeru Takamiya. Okay. But the list of people that contributed to the book, I'm not even going to get into because it's basically everybody in karate. All right. I plan to in the future purchase a copy of the book myself, even though it's in Japanese, and I'll use things like Google Translate for different sections that I'm interested in. So that's where the translation of that article came from. So it's not something that Andreas Quast just pulled out of his hat. Okay. It's a serious scholarly work. That was published in 2008. It was considered a big deal on Okinawa when it was published, and the research is considered pretty good. All right, pretty good. All right, and basically the premise was that Tatsuo, and this is what I put in my post, that Tatsuo Sensei may have studied with Miyagi Sensei for 3 years before Miyagi even founded Goju-ryu. And, the response from some people was kind of interesting, right? So Goju Sensei didn't think that that was true and basically said that, things like Tatsuo changed all the kata, which he really didn't. If you look at, Joe and Nakazato's Seisan and Isshinryu Seisan, other than twist, punch, and bone blocks, they're the same exact kata. The Nahanshi kata is pretty much the same, okay, except Tatsuo changed to a few more open hand techniques. All right. So, but again, whatever. If it offends you, bothers you, you don't like the fact that I made that statement, I don't really care. Okay. I'm just putting the information out there. All right. But I find it interesting how this history stuff goes. So, like me, I'm an armchair historian. And what do I mean by that? I'm reading what other people do research on. Am I doing some research? Yeah, of course. Like for instance, in 2019, I asked Kichiro Shimabuku Sensei where their family was during the war. And he informed me that Tatsuo Shimabuku had taken the whole family and they had fled to the island of Kyushu by boat. And he also added that many Okinawans tried to do this to get off the island because they knew war was coming there and it was going to be bad. And that many of them died on that trip to Kyushu. And he actually said, we were very lucky. So he told me they were there for the whole war. Okay, now, this is Tatsuo's son, Kichiro Shimabuku. Okay, maybe he's misremembering, but I don't know. And he was very young when that was going on, but I would think that would be something that would be talked about within the family. It's a pretty big event in people's lives, right? Okay, World War II. All right, just saying. So, so how do I like my history? I like my martial arts history, warts and all. You know, I'm not really concerned if something comes out and I'm like, oh my God, I think less of that guy. No, sorry. Everybody's human. Everybody makes mistakes. So for instance, I got a couple of books here I'm going to mention. So Kensei, Kian Chotoku, The Man and His Art, right? Phenomenal book by Patrick McCarthy, who I consider to be like a real historian of martial arts, does real research. Okay. And, in the book, there's an incident that some of the Okinawan newspapers covered where maybe Kian was involved with some prostitutes and the transporting of prostitutes. Okay, again, all right, whatever. All right, I'm more interested in this karate. It's an interesting story, but it is what it is. All right, and that's a fantastic book that I highly recommend if you want more serious history on Kian Chotoku. Okay, and what I mean by that is this book has no agenda. So the book is not saying that the karate we do is the true Kian karate, all right? And everybody else is Kian karate. Well, maybe isn't really Kian karate. It's just all different stories about Shotoku Kian, okay? And simple as that. So that's a great book, okay? So I look to the guys that are doing the real historical research, all right? And the other thing I find interesting is, like, I post a thing like that, and then someone responds to me and says, well, my source said this. But what I find is no one mentions their source. Okay, well, who's your source? Who is it? Who's the source that told you this? Okay, attach a name. Why is he someone we should be believed? Okay, it's important that you back up your claims with actual data. All right, when Andreas Quast came out with Karate 1.0, it was a big deal, and I'm lucky I have a copy of the book. And every once in a while I pick it up, I look through it, and I read stuff, and it's interesting to get the backdrop and understanding of what was really going on in Okinawa, and to frame the history of karate within that area. Same thing, Andreas recently came out with a book called, Bo Volume 1, and it's about all the Bo Adori dancers that are done in the different villages all over Okinawa and on the neighboring islands. And it's great because it has QR codes. You can click on it, you read about it, click on it, and you watch a video of it. And, it's extremely well researched. Extremely well researched, all right? Again, that word research, all right? Andreas Quast is a real researcher. He backs up his claims with sources, okay? And then just this last week, I finally got around to finishing this book, Anko Itosu, The Man, the Master, the Myth, by Thomas Feldmann. Okay. We're hoping to have Mr. Feldmann on the podcast in the near future. He's got a book coming out on Yabukensu. I will tell you that this, to me, is one of the best martial arts books I've read, on Okinawan karate and a particular subject, Anko Itosu. It's incredibly well researched. Footnotes at the bottom of every page. Anything he can't prove or anything where he doesn't, speak to someone directly about something, he says, I can't prove it. This is only something we've been told. All right. So fantastic book. If you want to really know what was going on with Okinawan karate, from the late 1800s or mid 1800s to the early 1900s, all right, and see the changes that took place to karate, and see how Anko Itosu, what his part in was that, and what several other masters' part in. I cannot recommend the book enough, okay? If you're practicing Okinawan karate, you need to buy that book, and you need to read it, okay? You need to read it, all right? This is real history, okay? No agenda, no nothing. It's a guy who decided to research a subject and really research it, interviewing family members, looking up old documentation. I mean, across the board. Phenomenal, all right? Mention my friend Joe Swift. He also wrote a book on Itosu Anko, which I just started reading, which I'm looking forward to. But I know Joe a long time. I know also he's another serious researcher. So I'm confident that a lot of the material in the book will be excellent. And I'm sure those two books together, reading them both, probably not going to be able to learn much more about Anko Itosu after reading those two books. Highly recommend the books I just showed you. And there's many other books that are good. Now I'll use an example of a book that is a history book that's basically just stories. And that's The Weaponless Warriors by Richard Kim. I read that book when I was 15. Oh my God. I was enthralled. The stories of Kion, Miyagi, okay, Motobu, Yabu Kensu, all these famous masters and all these stories he told. I was like, oh my God, look at these guys. They're like superheroes, okay? You know, the only problem is the book is oral stories. There's nothing to really back up a lot of what's written in the book, okay? And it's great. I love hearing the oral stories. I mean, Thomas Feldmann in his Itosu Anko book, he recounts a lot of the oral stories. But what does he say? They're oral stories. There's really no way to confirm them. And as we all know, as these stories go on and on, they have a tendency to get embellished. You know, I'm a big fan of Western history. I've read almost every book I can find on the OK Corral gunfight. And, you know, initially, it was mostly very simplified versions of what happened, very, you know. And then in the last 20 years, there's been so much serious research done on it that it's amazing, the things that they've learned about what was going on during that time and what caused that famous gunfight in Tombstone, Arizona. And again, so you had people that decided, well, we're not just going to go with the legend. We're actually going to do research and maybe debunk some things and maybe prove some other things. And that's exactly what they did. And again, great stuff. So how important is the history in terms of what we do as martial artists? I think it's very nice. I like it. I love reading about it. But that's not the end-all be-all. The end-all be-all is these are physical arts. So I'm more interested in, can I move better? Can I elevate my physical ability? Can I elevate others' physical ability? Okay. The history stuff is just a side study. All right. You know, am I ever going to have all the answers I want to everything, all the questions I have on the history of Ishinryu Karate or Mariyoshi Kobudo or any of these famous Okinawan masters, whether it be Miyagi or Kion or Motobu or Yabu Kensu, and we can just, you know, Hanashiro Chomo, we could just go down the list, right? The answer is no, we're never going to have all the answers because the problem is they've been gone for a long time. Many of the people that were around when they were alive is gone. So yeah, you can do research and you can get a lot of information, but it's never, ever going to be a complete picture, all right? The problem I have with some people is that they use history to further an agenda, okay? And that agenda could be whatever, personal agenda. Well, we want to show that our style's the best. We're doing the real karate, all right? Whatever that style is, okay? No, you know, so, you know. And basically what that boils down to is the Coke versus Pepsi, all right? So, you know, originally all these styles, there were no names, okay? It was just karate or te, right? There wasn't Goju-ryu, Isshin-ryu, Shorin-ryu, Rue-ryu. It was just karate. Let's use karate as the term, okay? And a lot of these guys, these early famous masters, they all knew each other. They all got together and trained because they were all trying to figure it out. All right? And they were all trying to get better. Okay? But then what happened was, you know, in the 20th century, right, styles started. And once you started naming a style, you say, okay, well, I do this roux, all right? And then the other person says, well, I do this roux. So now obviously what happens? Well, the guys that do roux number 1 think their roux is the best. And the guys that do roux number 2 think their roux is the best, okay? So now what are they going to do? Well, they're going to do all kinds of things. They're going to say our kata is more legitimate because our kata comes from this source. The other group's going to say, well, that's not true because our kata comes from this source and that's a better source, right? Meanwhile, they may not even know the source of their kata. Okay? So, because most of the kata don't have kanji. They're written in katakana or hiragana, right? So, nobody really knows how old the kata are, but they're not as old as everybody thinks they are. Okay? There's some kata that are older. You know, Seisan's probably an old kata. There's some Bo kata that are old. All right, but many of the kata are not that old. You know, probably 100 to 200 years old. All right, you know, so I always question certain people when they start saying, "Well, you know, we know in our history that this is a fact and this was okay," when in reality they don't know. Okay, they're guessing, they're assuming. All right. You know, it's important that we recognize the limitations on Okinawan martial arts history. All right? It's very important we realize the limitations. Okay? You know, we're never going to have the answers that we want. We're just not. It's impossible to get them. So we can surmise, you know, I'm a former detective, so I can detect. Okay, like for instance, one of the things I got responses last week saying, well, no, Tatsuo trained in a camp in 45 with Miyagi. And then they said, well, how is he getting to Naha when he lived in, you know, where is now Uruma City? Okay, so, you know, and that's pretty far. Even today on bus, it's an hour and a half, all right? But I posted an article the other day showing that there was train lines on Okinawa from 1914 to 1945, okay? And it wasn't just one train line, it was several train lines, okay? And Naha's the big city, so where are the train lines going? Well, eventually one of them's getting to Naha. So, again, the people that say, well, how was he getting there? Well, that's how he could have gotten there, okay? It's quite simple. He could have gotten there by train, all right? And initially the trains were steam power, and then I think they churned either to coal or maybe they were some other form of energy, right? And the thing to keep in mind is we don't know, all right? But when I posted that little article about the Okinawan trains, I got a bunch of messages saying, thank you for posting that. I never heard of that. Well, Andreas Quast told me about it. And one of the things he said was that most people aren't aware, right? Again, why is Andreas aware? Oh, because he does real research. He doesn't have an agenda, okay? He just puts the information out there, all right? So, you know, I try to take the same approach. When I released that video of Tatsuo, I wasn't saying that that information I was putting out there was 100% a fact, okay? But it's published in a serious work that was contributed by many, many, many of the top Okinawan masters, okay, back in 2008. So again, you know, you take the information as it is and you try to put all these pieces together and figure it out. But, you know, again, I just think that we put an overemphasis on, well, you know, our history is the real history and your history is the fake history. All right. And I just find that very amusing. Very amusing. All right. You know, it's different with some of the other arts I study. So Chen Taiji has a, you know, history going back, we know, 400 years. Could be older, but we know 400 because there's written documentation. Tenshin Shoden Katori Shinto-ryu, we know 600 years old. We know that because there's documentation going back 600 years. So Suishiru Kumiuchi Koshino Moare has an almost 400-year history. How do we know that? Because there's written documentation going back that far. Okay? In the case of karate, you are going to be hard-pressed to find written documentation going back very far. And again, there can be multiple reasons for that. One, the Okinawans are different from the mainland Japanese. Maybe they didn't feel a need to write down things as much as the Japanese did. All right. And also, World War II, I mean, let's face it, the island was decimated, and we don't know how much written documentation we lost. I mean, it's just as simple as that. Okay. We want to come up with all these different things, and, so we need to take the history of Okinawan Karate and Kobudo, not crazy seriously. All right. Just relax and kind of have fun with it. I mean, that's what I try to do. Like, I don't get angry when someone questions me on something because, again, I'm just putting the information out there. And if, the response is a butthurt response, well, that's not my problem. That's your problem. When someone posts something on any of the styles of karate, a historical reference, like I'll give you for instance, I pay for a medium subscription. And the reason I pay for the medium subscription is so everything Motobu Naoki writes, I can read. So Motobu Naoki does Motoburu. He's, descendant in the Motobu lineage. And he is one of probably the premier modern historian on Okinawan Karate and Kobudo. His stuff is fantastic. Fantastic. I mean, and something's almost out every day. So I get to read something every day. So I pay a medium subscription so I can do that and I can read it. And again, even his stuff, do I agree with everything? No, absolutely not. But his stuff is researched. He's quoting sources. Okay? That's what I like. All right? And, he's exposed a few things and explained a few things that really made me think. Right? And, we think we understand certain things and then it turns out, well, maybe there's more to the story. Okay? Andreas Quast. All right, he's on Patreon. Okay, I pay for Patreon, so whatever Andreas comes out with, I get to read. All right, I think it's important to support these people. If you want to know more about the history and the real history without an agenda, I think those are two real guys to follow. All right. Some other people that are doing good work, Yannick Schultz, all right, a few different people. And again, like even with Kobudo, Mariyoshi Kobudo, Mariyoshi Kobudo, I think most of the kata were created by Shimpo Mariyoshi based upon old techniques from his father and grandfather. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't care if the kata is not that old. Now, there are several kata that are old, okay? They are old, all right? Shimbaru no Sai, Chicken no Kun, okay? The techniques of the Kama kata, right? His father's nickname was Kama, right? So again, the techniques are old because how'd you train with weapons in the old days? There was no single man kata. It was you and another guy pairing off, going at it, working on the techniques because if you were going to use them against an opponent. The single man kata came later. That's a modern thing, okay? That's why most of the Japanese koru, everything is two-man techniques. A guy's attacking you, you're countering. Why? Because these martial arts were developed for the samurai. Samurai are professional military warriors. Okay? So, this idea of individual single-man kata, that's a more modern invention. It's not that old. Okay? So it's important to understand that. And even in like Ishinru, Tatsuo Shimabuku, he learned Tokumini no Kun from Kian. Okay, it's the only person he could have learned it from. I mean, we know I've got it from Kenshin Tokumura. Okay, it's mentioned in the Kian book that McCarthy Sensei put out. Andreas Quast has told me this. We know that Tatsuo Shimabuku was going to Kian's house to train. All right, and we know that Tatsuo was off the island for most of the war, if not all of the war. All right, and we know Kian died in 1945. Okay. So that means Tatsuo must have learned Tokumine no Kun before they fled the island to safety, what they felt would be safety, in Kyushu. All right. So if that's the case, okay, fine. And if someone says to me, well, no, that's not true, okay, well, you're going to have to show me a better timeline. You're just going to have to, okay? So, some of the other things were with Tatsuo Shimabuku, he told several first-generation students, because he made Isshinryu a Kobudo system also, that, if you really want good Kobudo, you should study with a Kobudo master. And, students like Winkler Sensei did that. He trained with Kataru Iha, and some of the other Isshinryu guys might have done some extra Kobudo training. Myself, I went to Gakiya Sensei, which I feel that training with him helped my Isshinryu Kobudo tremendously. All right. Swinging a bow is swinging a bow. Using the sai is using the sai. Okay. There's only so many ways you can use them. All right. And, my understanding when I see the some of the other versions of Tokumine, I'm not sure of their source. The Nakazato version, I'm not sure. Okay? I'm not sure. I'm sorry, but if Tatsuo Sensei felt his Kobudo wasn't that good, some of the unique techniques we do in our Tokumine, you're not telling me Tatsuo made those up. I'm sorry, I'm not going to believe it. You can believe it. I'm not going to get upset with you. Because again, you can believe whatever you want. Right? Same way I'll believe whatever I want. All right? But I think people take the history a little too serious. I think people need to lighten up, all right, and understand that it's all fun, because that's really all it can be, all right. Martial arts are important. They're important to us because we do it. Most people in the world don't give a shit about anything to do with any martial arts history, okay, and they look at us being so involved in it and think we're a little out there, okay. So, enjoy the history. Consider some of the authors I talk about here. Again, I can't recommend Thomas Feldmann's book on Anko Itosu enough. Obviously all the books I showed, McCarthy Sensei's book on Kion, I mean, these are phenomenal. Anything by Andreas Quast, anything by Joe Swift, all right. Motopu Naoki, okay. I mean, the stuff he's coming out with, fantastic, okay. Highly recommend it, okay. And again, I read it and I'm like, oh, that's great, right? And I don't get crazy over it, right? I don't get angry over it, because it's why? What's the point, right? I go out and I practice. That's what I do. So I read the history for fun, enjoy it, and I go out and do the hard work, which is the practice, all right? Hope you've enjoyed this one, all right? Relax when it comes to the history. It is what it is, all right? If you liked it, please click like. Please subscribe to the channel, closing in on 14,000 subscribers, all right? Consider becoming a monthly member. We've got over 100 instructional videos up there, all right, that people seem to really like. Again, we have some interviews coming down the pike, okay? I'm not going to say who. I'll let it be a surprise. We have some other things planned for the channel. And I hope you enjoyed this one, and I'll see you in the next episode. Take care.